Welcome to Brisbane Property Talk podcast. Tonight our guest, Ossie Niksch, is, have I got that pronunciation right there, Ossie? Or
Mate, it's like saying it's German, so
Yes.
it's like Porsche, it's
Yes.
like Niksch.
Niksch.
Niksch. Niksch.
Yeah,
Niksch.
we've got Ossie here tonight, and tonight, as I mentioned to the crowd through the intro, where we've got a little bit of a different format tonight with Ossie, largely because Ossie's story is rather unique. It's rather interesting, and I think it's a story that's well and truly worth telling. So, as we move through this podcast, hopefully everybody can get a little bit of something out of it, and also a snapshot of what Ossie has done during the course of his life and his business life. So welcome, Ossie.
Thank you very much. I'd love to share it with you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the evening.
Yeah, fantastic. So by the accent, mate, South African. Whereabouts in South Africa did you...
I've been here 27 years. I'm not supposed to have an accent anymore.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah, so did you come... we'll go back, but did you was the idea to come from South Africa straight to Australia? Or did
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And like most South Africans, you didn't stop in Perth, mate. You decided to keep going over to the better side.
I came straight over to Brisbane.
Yep.
I didn't come via New Zealand either, like others that's sitting here as well.
Yep.
And so on. But yeah, no, I got enough points to come straight to Brizzy.
Fantastic. So let's go back, mate. Whereabouts in South Africa where did you grow up?
So it all started in a little town on the south coast of South Africa, a town called George, named after King George III, I think.
Yeah.
Beautiful little town. To be quite honest, everybody in South Africa that hasn't immigrated has moved down to George there because it's just this beautiful. They call it the heart of the garden route. It's a beautiful little town. So I grew up there. I'm born and raised there, and did my high school over there.
Yep.
And then from there, I went to study as a teacher in Port Elizabeth.
Yes.
Finished my teaching diploma. I went from Teachers College to the university. Wasn't very successful. Just played too much rugby and drank too much beer. Too many beers.
Yep.
And and I ended up actually. I went over to coach sport in Israel.
Yes.
Over there for the Maccabee Games in 1984.
Right.
And so after that I came back and I had to do national service. So I did my 2 years national service.
Yep.
In the army, I was infantryman.
Yep.
So I did my first year officers course in 1986, and then in of 86, once I became a lieutenant, our passing out parade where we became officers, and the big C-130s Hercules planes were waiting to fly us up to Angola. So I spent a couple of months in Angola. I was there for just short of a year.
Yes.
And in those days, I talk 86, 87.
So what was the principal responsibility you had to take care of in Angola?
So remember, I always say to people, especially people that don't know their history, the last shots of the Cold War were fired by us in Angola because the Angolan government at the time was a Marxist government that was backed by East Germans, backed by Russian advisors and East German advisors. But at any stage, if I can remember correctly, there were about 70,000 Cubans on the ground. So I went up there to 51 Battalion at a little place called Ruacana. We were near a big waterfall, and there was a big hydroelectric dam power scheme there that we looked after. So at the time there, we were stopping the communists coming down to southern part into Namibia.
Yes.
That's so actually in 1988 when the Berlin Wall fell, that's when that war also ended.
So with national service and then having to go and serve in Angola in the situation that you had, how do you take that? How do you take or what attitude do you take into moving up there? Is it a matter of you're just doing a job? Do you feel national pride, so you need to protect what you believe in?
So national service, national service started, I think, if I can remember correctly, in the late 60s. And so we grew up knowing that we had to go and do national service.
Yes.
So a lot of people would try to go and study forever at uni, but in the end you had to go and do it. And you know what? I'm part of there's a Facebook group actually for ex-servicemen for the border war, 1966 to 1988. And there's about 100,000 plus in the group, but each and every one of us would like to have those times back. We wanted to go there. It was our duty.
Yes.
And we learned so much about mateship, friendship, supporting one another.
Yeah.
Well, and most probably, there's a lot of us, myself included, who lost mates up there, and it does do something to you as you grow older. You have your own kids.
A different perspective.
Completely different perspective. Yeah, just a value of life.
Yes.
And realize. I always say when I'm here in Australia, there's so many first world problems that people complain about. On part of my job when I get into people's homes and they were ex-Vietnam vets and so on, it's so nice to, never mind friend or foe, if you were in the military and 20, 30, 40 years later, you catch up, there's a common denominator and your brothers. Your brothers.
So, with South Africa, I suppose from my point of view, there's always a perception that Joburg's always, reasonably volatile. There's people expect certain things. In fact, I work with a South African guy in a previous job, and he lived in a compound in Joburg and had a couple dogs for security and all that sort of stuff. Typically, is that something that's encountered throughout the whole country, or is it more isolated to sort of that larger sort of town? No,
South Africa in a whole is a very very dangerous country.
Right.
So never mind where you are. Myself. So my last 11 years. So I did my 2 years national service, and then I joined the Air Force actually as a sports officer, and I worked. Ended up working for the Directorate Sport at Defence Headquarters. Yep. And I lived in Pretoria, which is about 60 k's. It's like Brisbane and Gold Coast apart from Johannesburg. And had the big security fences around, had the 2 big German Shepherds, and owned quite a few firearms. And, you never drove around without your firearm. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed. I've never owned a firearm in Australia. Interested, sleep with my doors open, even in this day and time with all the youth crime. I like them to all come into my house. In any case, but yeah, no. South Africa is not. The big thing in South Africa now is all the security estates. So you've got big security estates. Once you're in there, you feel all safe. But even then, you still get crime into those security estates as well.
Yeah. And of course, apartheid was going on at that stage as well, too, wasn't it?
Yeah, apartheid was we grew up under apartheid, and we can sit hours and discuss the pros and cons. It's about that, but there was a lot of human rights that was violated around those days. But a lot of that was also that people did for their protection. But it was also not understanding each other's cultures and not wanting to understand each other's cultures, and that's, once again, coming back to Australia, I've become friends with South African over here, that in South Africa, under those times, we weren't allowed to be friends. That was just because of the cultural differences and the laws and so on.
Because fear of ridicule, if you will?
No, just because they were the black and white thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And that's why I just go, when you're in Australia, be grateful for where you are, because you are being judged on who you are, not the color of your skin, not the it's who you are as a human being, as a person, what you do, what you give to society. Where we grew up in the worst environment where you got judged by your appearance.
Right. And were you in Pretoria when you met Hanley?
No. Hanley and I met over here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Met another bloody sapphire over here.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. So if that's the case, what was the motivation to come to Australia? And did you come by yourself or?
No. So all right. So I decided I got married in 1989, and my first child was born in 1994, 2 weeks before the election. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was a major in the South African Defence Force. I worked at Defence Headquarters.
Where's that, in Pretoria?
In Pretoria. Worked at Defence Headquarters, and I was very positive about the country. I thought if everybody just put the past behind them and strive for a better future, the country has got a great future ahead of it.
Yes.
But 12 months into after the election, and I was very much involved with helping the former.
Are you talking about Mandela?
Yeah. So the ANC's armed wing was Umkhonto we Sizwe, and they were integrated into the SADF, which became the SANDF. So South African Defence Force became the South African National Defence Force. So I got a medal for that, the Unitas medal, to help with that. And but it's what I saw was a lot of that there wasn't a very big understanding that in the military all the money belongs to the taxpayer. The money isn't there to be spent by you.
Yes.
For your benefit.
Yes.
And that's unfortunately what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The National Defence Force in South Africa is done. It's
right.
Yeah. And a year after I said no. So I applied for immigration in end of June 1995. So my daughter was born in 94, and I just decided that I don't want to raise my daughter there.
Sure.
I also just decided I don't want to, me and my wife at the time, we said that because we had family members becoming part of the crime statistics, and we had that agreement that if we ever get into a situation where one of us can get away with our daughter and leave the other one to perish, or then so be it. And then once we decided to immigrate, we decided on another child, and so my son was born there in 97, and we immigrated end of 97. So he was born February 97, and we immigrated in November 97.
Yep. So just a question. An intruder that will come into your house, does the local authorities, if you were to take action against that intruder, the local authorities would deem that as self-defence, or is it just a really, really hazy situation?
No, it is all about, it's one of those difficult things, but what happened, the general consensus was if your wife feels that she was threatened, she was the one that pulled the trigger.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't want to. It's not politics, We wish everybody, to have the best of life wherever they are, but unfortunately over there, it was. I think every South African has got a family member or a very good friend that has been a victim of crime.
Yeah, well, you sort of alluded to it that, how you live your life here is different to how you had to live your life over there. So I dare say your senses were always fairly inflated.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, I had the 2 German Shepherds.
Were they expendable?
Oh, no, really, they had to come past me to hurt my dogs. I love my dogs.
Yeah.
But no, they were always alert. I always tell people this story that they don't, in Australia, or our pets are our children, and they get fed how many times a day in South Africa? You feed your dog in the morning.
Yes.
Because at night they need to be raving hungry and alert. You don't want to have a dog that's fed by 6 o'clock in the evening and sleep at the night when it needs to be alert.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting because a friend, actually, our first grade captain at Toombul is a copper, and he's looking to get into the dog squad. Yeah. Right. So he's got a pup at the moment that's getting trained up, and every second week they're out at Wakehole to do their thing, and when they have to do tracking, they don't feed them, so that when the time comes to track, they're zeroed in, and then once they find what they're looking for, that's when they give them a feed. So it is interesting. So moving to Australia, tough decision?
No, not at all. Once you make the decision, you go, oh, geez, I want to go. I started.
But for what reason? What was the appeal?
No, I think the appeal was giving our children a future.
Safe.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I did a little bit of research. We had a look around, and those days, the internet wasn't there yet. So you did a bit of research and got some books and was reading some stuff, and obviously we looked at all different countries. So Australia was always our first choice. Our second choice, New Zealand, so we could get into here. Third choice was, I think, the UK, then Canada, and then USA. But the fact that we wanted to move, we wanted to get out of that.
Yep.
And while we were applied to Australia, it took us 2 years. 2 years you had to wait. It cost
to get a visa.
To get a visa.
Yep.
Yeah, and they ask you all different things that they want. But 2 years to get the visa, and then once we got it, we go, all right, here we come. And no jobs. You didn't come with a job. You had to come here.
Yep.
Then come and look for a job.
Right. So that was going to be my next question. So you essentially packed the family up.
Yeah.
Got in the big silver bus in the sky, landed in Brisbane, and.
I'll backtrack a little bit. So basically, because we knew that was because I've got friends that's done that. They just got on a plane and landed here.
Yeah.
So we did a LSD trip. Look, see, decide.
Yes.
So we
I was thinking about something else. But,
So our LSD trip was 6 months before we immigrated. Yeah.
Sure.
And in June of 95.
Yes.
June of 97.
Yes.
And so we flew into Sydney. I had a mate who worked for Atlas Aircraft Corporation, who immigrated 18 months earlier, and he was in Parramatta. So we stayed with them for a little while, but Sydney was never really our, we never really contemplated Sydney, but we flew in there. I drove down to Canberra, rented a car, drove down to Canberra, went to speak to the military over there, but I just turned 35 at the time, and I was about to turn 35 that December. They go, no, mate, 35 is our cut-off date. And I think because I was a major, they didn't wasn't interested.
Yeah.
Then from there, I flew up here. We flew up here. We knew somebody. There was a lady who worked with me in the Air Force. I actually met her on a court martial that she was the prosecutor and I was the additional member on the court martial. And when we went for lunch, she said, "Oh, my parents are coming up from Brisbane for my wedding," and so on. And I then went to talk to them, and they gave me a little newspaper from what's the little newspaper down south from Beenleigh, around that area.
Oh, okay,
mate. And I was checking all the news and the car prices and the houses and everything. No. I want to go down there. But so we flew up to her parents. They were in Springwood, and we stayed with them. And while we were up here, I saw that the corrective services were looking for people. And saying that, so me being a teacher, but I never taught. I was a qualified teacher, never taught, went to the military. My ex-wife now, but she had an IT degree, so she could find work pretty much very easily. But it was where I needed to find a job, because she was going to sit home for the first couple of months with the kids.
Yeah, right.
Because they were so little.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we flew down to Adelaide. We had a look at Adelaide, and while I was there, I rung up the corrective services here, and they said, "Look, send us your stuff, but we'll only give you an interview once you arrive here."
Sure.
And then we flew over to Perth, and it was in July then, and with just this most perfect day in July. Everybody said to us, "You're lucky to have a day."
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful place, and we went over to Fremantle and all of that. So Perth became our second choice, but mostly because it was so much closer to South Africa. But Brisbane was always our first choice. So we arrived here in 30th of November 1997. Woke up the next morning, 3 days before my 35th birthday. And we were in that little caravan park behind what's the BMW, then Daisy Hill. That's now
I know
there.
Yeah,
God, mate.
Just off the Pacific Highway.
It was a heat wave.
Yeah.
It was a caravan. There were no aircon.
Yeah.
We were sleeping on these vinyl. We didn't have anything to sleep. We slept on these vinyl seat covers, and so in there with a 9-month or 10-month-old and a 3-year-old. And I remember we looked outside the next day and go, "Geez, here we are." And at the same time, that was when they had the big strike on the wharves. So we ended up waiting nearly 4 months for our furniture.
Really?
Yeah, fun and games. But I went to rent a car the next day. I rented a car, then I let the car idle with the aircon on, let the 2 kids sleep in the car. It took us about a week to get her home and find a home to go and stay. Also no aircon in the home, but it was better than the
fans.
Than the little God, we got cooked in there.
Yeah. So you started in corrective services, did you?
Yeah. So when I got here, I said, "Look, here I am," and they said, "Look, we're up north doing some interviews." So I think about 22nd of December, I got an interview, and then. The bloke, one of the guys who's now deputy director of corrections, he was one of the guys who interviewed me, and he helped me a hell of a lot, because they asked me about the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. I had no bloody idea, and so he was telling me all about it and so on.
So what correctional facility did you work out of?
At the time, it was Sir David Longlands, which was the maximum secure.
Yes.
It was just after the escape from the postcard bandit, the big escape, a couple of months later.
Yeah.
So that was actually quite funny. So I did my nationals. I first did my course at Waikol, and then that's where I started. And
So what was your perception? So like obviously coming from South Africa, where things were things were robust. And how did you find the Brisbane correctional system?
Mate, they're soft on the crumbs. It's soft, mate. I couldn't believe it. But in any case, it was a job. It was a job and so on. But as far as I'm concerned, the inmates run the jail.
Right.
Honest to God.
So how did it keep you interested?
No, because I got to know some of the blokes and so on, and I had over the years a couple of blokes that I met. They work for me now.
That were inside?
No, not inside. Yeah, not inside. I've bumped into a few of them as well.
Have you?
Yeah. But in any case, my first night shift, there was an overdose. It was a funny story. So the guy I was working with, he was an ex-sergeant major in the Australian Defence Force. So you walk down, and then you first check that the doors are locked to make sure. And then when you walk back, you count them. You make sure they're still in there, and you count them, and then you go back. Sure. And we did the early one. And the late, you do a couple during the night up into And there was a rugby, those days it was still the Super 10. And the Queensland Reds were playing against Natal the Sharks.
Yep.
And I said to I was there a couple of weeks now there, and I was working as a casual at the time, and that was my first night shift. I said, look, I'd like to watch the game. Can we maybe do that second head count before the game starts, because the game was being played in South Africa, late game. Yeah, we can do that. So we walked down, and this old sergeant major, old Billy, we walked down, make it sure. So we got to the end, we turned around, and we walked back. We were halfway back up the passage. So the supervisor is standing there, the night supervisor, looking through the office with the big perspex windows down to where we are. And Billy said to me, he said, hey, Ossie, just double check number 13 down there for me. And I went back there and I had a look, and I looked down there, and there's old mate lying with a big needle in his arm, and he's purple, mate. He's gone.
Yeah.
And I turned around to Bill, I said, mate, I might be the newbie on the block, but I'm not writing the bloody report. You found him, you write the report.
Yeah.
In any case, we had a good laugh. And it's the first time I saw actually when they inject the drug addict and brings them back to life.
Oh, the adrenaline?
Yeah. I go, whoa, just, but yeah. So he made it that night. But yeah, that was my first night shift.
Yeah, interesting, mate. Good induction into the correctional service.
Yeah, God, I can tell you a few stories there, but in any case, we might have to censor most of them.
Yeah. Well, mate, that could be another podcast. Yeah. So from there, mate, you went into pest management, or sort of how do we start to sort of set, you know?
All right. So I was there just on 7 years. So late 2004, I started to look at doing something else. Pest management, prison officers, same thing. But in any case, managing the pests.
Yeah.
But no, I at the time, my kids were, they were starting to go to school and so on. I was doing quite a lot of. We didn't have anybody. No family here,
support.
No support.
Yep.
So I was at the point where I was doing a hell of a lot of night shifts, and it buggers your clock, and do a lot of night shifts, and I did a lot of swap to do weekends, and we decided that my wife at the time, she was working at quite a high pressure IT job, and she wanted to be home with the kids, so we started to look at me doing something else.
Yep.
Yeah, so then I found a franchise, and that's another chapter. Franchise to buy, and that's how I got into there.
Yep. So you started the franchise. You sold the franchise to start pest.
All right. So what it was is I was the first franchise of this group.
Yep.
I'll just have a sip of water. I was the first franchise, so I was like the golden child, apparently. And it went well for the first 18 months, 2 years. As we started to suddenly, we were about 20-odd franchises.
Yeah.
And then the wheels started coming off, from the franchisor.
Right.
Greed, micromanagement and greed.
Yes.
And I got to the point, and that's some of life's lessons. I started off, it went really well, and they asked me to actually take over the termite work from the owner, and they asked me to get more employees on, so I had at some stage 3 employees. I was doing termite work and all of that. I was thrown a little bit in the deep end, because there wasn't, here, you just go, no, you do it, and I had to do a lot of self-teaching with a lot of the stuff, but sometimes it's throw in the deep end and learn how to swim.
Swim, absolutely.
But so as we become, there was a lot of nastiness crept into the fortnightly meetings and so on, and at one point when one of the franchisees were pulled in front of everybody and belittled, I got into my car and I rang him. I said, Johnny, I said, mate, we were all gutless wonders in there, no backbone. I said, it's not happening again. I said, I'm telling you now. I said, everybody was cowering away. I'm telling you now, it's not happening again. And then some of my, not too long after, some of my employees resigned. But what happened is because all the work came through the office, the head office, and my poor blokes were driving everywhere, and they were being given a lot of grief, and he just said, mate, I can't do it anymore. Mm. So, but what it was is they sold more franchises and they needed my clients.
Right.
And so in the end, there was a phone call between me and the owner, and the owner, and it escalated to the point where I said, mate, I said, I'm fielding 5-6 phone calls every morning from franchisees trying to keep their motivation and their mental health going because of the way we all get treated. So we're not franchisees, we're glorified employees, but an employee can take his things and walk away.
Yes.
We've all invested our money out of our homes for our families in here.
Sure.
And we basically beholden to all of your crap. And I got home that night, and my wife said to me, you better come and have a look at this email. And yeah, it was, I was the pig in the fairy tale.
Yes, yes.
And we had this big grievance meeting, and we sat there and write your grievance or forever hold your peace. And I wrote, and I sent it to everybody, because they used to love to, have you one-on-one and
yeah.
So I made it a group thing. So, and that's one of, it's one of those things that blokes need to learn. Not just blokes, everybody, that there's strength in numbers.
Yes.
And we were all sitting there. So half of them thought, all right, if they pick on that half, we'll be all right.
Yes.
And so they started picking on old mate. They left me for last. And yeah, so after that, I lasted another 12 months, and then I walked away. But they were just slowly, mate. I got a forensic accountant in. It cost me $14,000 for that. I lost about, in the last 18 months there, about just around $400,000. And I'm happy to talk about this, because I tried for 6 years to take these bastards to court.
Sure.
And they changed 3 times solicitors.
Yes.
But in the end, it cost me a marriage. It cost me my homes. It cost me a hell of a lot of things. But it taught me a lot of, it's just life's journey. You need to go. But yeah, it's and it was also, the struggles of myself mentally going through, and that's most probably where Steaks with Mates, though it wasn't that, had its roots.
Yes.
Is I got some mates to have a barbecue with me once a month on a Friday afternoon. And we did that for a couple of months, and yeah.
So that was your mechanism to release the pressure valve a little bit?
Around my buddies.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's something we all need to be aware of and have the opportunity to do if we do, but if we can, but sometimes that's easier said than done.
If you have a look on my, I think I've put it on Steaks with Mates Facebook page and so on. There's I think it was the UK guy that was the big interviewer, Parkinson, where he spoke to Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
And Muhammad Ali said, when he prays to God, don't bring me gold or jewels or whatever, but bring me a good friend, because I don't want money, I want a good friend.
Yes.
And that's what it is.
Yes. Absolutely, and you can't have enough of them. That's
right.
That's the bottom line. So I'm assuming Pest Bully morphed out of out of this franchise that.
So I walked away. So I walked away. I lost a lot of money, and I just.
So you're by yourself.
Yeah. So you sit when you sit in your bed. I think it was a Thursday night. I can't remember. Might not have been, but it was a week's night. Sat in my bed, me and my wife, and we were sitting there. It was about 1 o'clock, 1:15 in the morning, and you make that decision. You're going to forfeit the house because you've got a loan against the house, your cars. You have to start the journey to get out of this.
Yes. Yeah.
This hole, that you're in, and So what happened? So I started. I set up a business.
Yes.
And then I started I went through the solicitor, and the solicitor has helped me a hell of a lot. But it still cost me extra $110,000 most probably, with the solicitors and the barristers and this and that and all of that. But going for, so I started the Pest Bully, and the Pest Bully came from, you know what, I will never bully people around me. The only people that gets bullied or the only things that gets bullied are the pests.
Sure.
And that's where the Pest Bully came from. My kids helped with creating the little logo.
Yes.
And all of that. So yeah, Pest Bully comes from that time.
Yep. And when we spoke last week, we sort of had a bit of a chat about your background, and you considered yourself a helper. Yeah. You like helping people. With that sort of trait, I would assume also that sometimes your decision making wouldn't be based around how you feel about something. It would be what other people would potentially would potentially gain.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, people. A lot of my old clients went looking for me because of my connections I had with them, and you know, and people know that they can ring me. I remember Hunley, when Hunley and I started going out, I got a phone call one night. I think it was 10:15. And she looked at me, she said, surely you're not going to go there this time of night. Went the next morning, but yeah, people knew that I was always there if there's something that concerns them around their house, especially with termites and all of those things. But yeah, it is a bit of solving their pest problems.
Yeah.
But I've over the years built my clientele because I talk to people, and I'll get there. I'm blessed with a relatively good memory.
Yes.
I'll get there 12 months later, and I go, "Hey, how go with your son that this or this happened?" And go, you remember? I say, yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
And that's when the connection lies.
Yes.
You know, when I always say to people, you can do small talk, and you can just be talking shit. You can do small talk because you really care and you're really interested. I said, and people pick up on that.
Absolutely.
You know, if you go, people actually, they ask you because they're interested in you. They don't just ask you because it's the right thing to do or doing the nice thing.
So, mate, Pest Bullies formed. Obviously, through the process, you've met Hanley, and so your personal life is starting to come back, to normal, so to speak,
That's right.
whatever normal is. And steaks with mates. What was the inspiration behind just getting some people together to to have a steak, a beer, and a chinwag?
So first of all, Hunley is the one that came in, mate. I've got ADHD big time.
We all do, mate.
Hunley is the one that's coming here. She said to me tonight, she said, just stay on topic. In any case, but she's the one that came in and my business and put structure into place, put a lot of things into place and made it, and also said to me, I had two business partners, and they were always on holidays.
Yeah.
She said, you need to get rid of them.
Yeah.
They're riding on your back, and I did. And in any case, so I've got a mate, and it's one of the mates that helped me when I was South African bloke. And he went through a really, really tough time. He got cancer, and he beat the cancer, and then afterwards he went through a marriage breakup. And he was not in a good place. And I said to Hunley at the time, it was April 5 years ago, I said to Hunley, I need to just get the guys together for a beer and a steak. So we started off at the Grand View Hotel over there in Cleveland, and I think the first night there we were 17.
Yep.
And so from there it started to grow, and about 3 or 4 months later we said, look, it's too far for a lot of the blokes to drive out to there. So we went to Brecky Creek, and that started to grow, and it every month. Then one night I invited a mate of mine, a bloke I met. My son, he's had his last 2 years, he was at Ipswich Grammar School to play a bit of rugby. And his grade 11 teacher and I became really good mates. And Jeff, 11 years older than me, 12 years older than me, 73 was last year. Unfortunately passed away last year from prostate cancer. But Jeff and I, good mates, and I said, Jeff, come and have a beer and a steak with the boys. And Rikus, my son, would love to see you. came over, and he actually brought his son-in-law, his oldest daughter's husband along. Who was actually a pupil of his at EP. And it turned out to be Professor Adam Scott, who's the director of cardio science, and also the founder of White Cloud Foundation.
Yes.
And Adam said, "Geez, Ossie," he said, "is these the numbers you get?" I think we were about 60 that night. I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Just start a charity." I said, "Mate, last thing I'm interested in. It just needs to be relaxed, boys, to come."
Sure.
So, and we had a bit of a conversation. I decided that we'll make the Steaks with Mates part of his charity. So there's a lot of blokes who can contribute to the charity. Like one of the young blokes, Eric Cheshire from Connected Platforms. Like since then, he's been doing all of the charities, IT for them, and look after all of that. So there's a lot of guys that's come in, and they've, some of the fundraisers, they've spent quite a bit of money. But the whole thing with Steaks with Mates is to have a place where blokes come, hang out once a month, have a beer and steak, meet each other. There's a lot of networking happening there, but the focus isn't on networking.
Yeah.
The focus is on getting there, meet other blokes, have a talk, and once you connect, that naturally comes. That's Steaks with Mates for me is just that space where I really enjoy seeing the boys coming together. And it's not about how many turn up, because if 5 of the blokes turn up, only 5 turn up, the level of conversation changes completely.
Sure.
Because those most probably those are the 5 that needs an ear, needs to get something off their chest. And so it goes up and down, and so all depends on the climate, the time of the year, what happens in the economy and all of those things, but we're there.
It's interesting because if you take the expectation away, or you take the pressure away, we then do have a greater tendency to talk, as opposed to like we do hear from time to time, if only he could tell us what was going on, sort of thing. You know what I mean? And I think, and that's sort of more to my point and how our podcast started, because it's about getting people together or having people talk way before that point. Because once we're at that point, things are amplified, things become problematic and complicated. And sometimes it's pretty hard to steer that ship away.
Mate, and I say to the guys, and I've been through my own battles, with business and all that. I said it's just sometimes, ring that mate, talk to them, and have a conversation, have the joke, and then it just gives people that one more day. So you know what? It's I rung a bloke one night. On a weekend, and he was like, "Who's this?" I said, "Hey, mate, it's Ossie." We had a chat and so on. I said, "I want to see if you want to come over and have I knew he was going through a marriage breakup, quite a bad one. And I don't judge who's right or wrong in the break. Everybody needs help. And he texted me later on. He said, "Oh, Ossie, thanks for the call." He said, "I really needed that." What I took from it is he was in a pretty dark space. When you could hear there was a lot of anger when he answered the phone call, and then it was, and that sometimes just that sliding door moment where you get a bloke and say, "Hey, somebody actually wants you to come and have a beer and a steak with you."
What gives you pleasure?
Oh, well, to see people being happy. To see people having something to look forward to connect people. That's I really enjoy getting blokes. What I really enjoy, look at some of these young blokes over here. The young Ben is how old are you, Ben? 23, 24? 24 now. Ben was a year after my stepdaughter, and at Sheldon College, but. Ben last year rang me. He said, "I really like to hang out with you." Here I am. I'm nearly 62, and he wants to see how I network, and I pride myself. I'm a networker. I love getting people to connect with each other, and I love seeing the younger generation that we can get them to support one another and talk to one another. And I always say, they can learn a lot from us, but we can also learn from them, because they're the one moving forward, so that makes me happy. My dogs make me happy. I enjoy my dogs.
Well, tell us about them. Germans.
No, Hunley makes me happy, mate. If it wasn't for Hunley, I wouldn't have been around, mate. I would have been still around in a business, with the business and all of that. She's
I think it's worse. It's super intriguing the way you've worked your way up as well. As opposed to someone standing in the screen, pointing and saying, I'm the grocery doing this. For me personally, I've been paying attention the whole time, and becoming, as a young business owner, it's definitely, for me, I've just been paying attention to the whole time. And it's great. Like you said, for the younger folk, it's great, and particularly for the people that are looking to expand. Most definitely, because there's challenges as well.
Mate, and
and there's going to be, and like you said, there's a lot of, say for instance Dave, he's above me, and he comes down sometimes, and I'm on the phone, and I'm stressed as an after, and I'm, hold on Dave, give us 1 sec, but there's something that you have good days, you have bad days, but
that's right.
I think it's great. It's great.
Thanks for that. And
was that planned or natural? How you took those steps?
Mate, I most probably, let me put it this way. Hunley and I, the reality is we're still not where we want to be in a business sense, because we've had a lot of obstacles in our life, and I always said I actually want to one day have a podcast, and I want to go and sit down, and I want to call it Talking About Life's Potholes and Life's Arseholes, because there's been a few of them around, let me tell you. And just that thing of you sometimes get to meet, and in the end you're just being used. And it costs you a lot of money in the end to get rid of these people. But in the end, we all have got different journeys in life, and in the end, you need to realize when you go through tough times, what do I learn from this? What's the lesson in it? And then and share it with those around you. Don't if you go through a tough time, don't keep it for yourself. Because it can bloody ride you into the ground, that stress, and so speak to people around you and get advice. And a lot of times when you share that, people go, mate, but you've got this, you can do it.
Yeah, I think the main point too, it's not just business. A lot of it's family too.
Yeah.
Even coming from a 33-year-old family is a massive thing. That has been a hindrance for me business-wise. Say for example, I've got a mum that's heavily dependent on me, and a father that's sick, and it all combines it.
Sure.
And it puts a lot of pressure on one person. Which is it's what are you doing?
Thanks, mate.
I can hear what's being said here about the value of what come in. I've become part of a sort of mixed group that's quite encouraging. I hear what you're saying. But can I ask you, you talk about the fact that
Snakes with mates.
Is a place where they can unload. I hear the word trust. I hear the word sort of input. Two questions. What do you think really is the heartbeat of why that works in that situation? What is that value there that comes through? And the second question I really want to ask is something separate from that is, what I'm asking is, out of all the experiences you've come through and kicking around and drain pipes being through and shipping trail, what do you feel is your main value there? What is your top value?
All right.
That's the second question. The first question is, what is the heartbeat of why that dynamic works?
Mate, you know, I've got there's some blokes there at Steaks with Mates, of blokes from all different very successful business people, very successful business people, and there's blokes who are just starting business. There's blokes who are struggling and all that. But I can tell you, even the bloke who has got lots of money in his bank account, who is very successful, has got exactly the same stresses and so on of the bloke that thinks, old mate up there, Jess, isn't he lucky? You know, he looks like he's got everything under control. Yeah. And I've got that bloke who talks to me, and he's 42 years old. He's an absolute success story. And say, mate, you know, I've just gone through this stress and this. I can't sleep and I can't do this, and then you hear some of the things he has to deal with, and you realise that although we different ages and we different businesses and we look like we all different levels of success or struggle or whatever, but the things that we have to deal with is very much the same. And it's sometimes when that bloke stands up, and we've had that at Steaks with Mates, where one bloke stands up and say, I'm going through this, and once one bloke stand up and say it, you know, there's others who get the courage to say, yeah, I've done this, I had to battle with this and that. But when these guys look up, and somebody that stands up there that they all look up to says, geez, boys, I've been struggling a little bit with this and that, and it just makes them suddenly feel that they're not alone. You know, that if he can struggle with it, you know, I'm not the failure. I'm not the you know, I shouldn't be so hard on myself. And I think so. So the second question was.
So just on that, I hear that heartbeat is I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And the second one is out of all the experiences, what has become your number one value?
My number one value, yeah. No, you know what is my value, and Hanley and I had a conversation about this quite a bit over the years. Is I've got this where I believe everybody has got good in them. You know, it's that whole thing. I don't know if you know the story about. It's a story about the young American Indian who was sitting with his chief, the grandfather who was the chief, and the grandfather said to him, you get the bad wolf and the good wolf, you know, and you've got both of them in you. And they constantly fight. And he said, but Granddad, which one wins in the end? He says, the one that you feed, you know. And that's what I always, and that's where I go, I don't want to meet people and immediately distrust them. I meet people and take you as a good bloke until you prove me different. And that's where I come from. And like I said before, you know, that the thing about life's potholes and life's arseholes. And I've been really over the years disappointed with blokes who, you know, I got together and then a couple of months later, 18 months later, 2 years later, you just, that they have got no regard for other people's, you know, mental health, for anything, because they've got something, whether it's financial or whatever it is, they will walk over anybody for it. And that's not the type of people I want to be around me or within the group. I want for us all to be able to if I need help, I can say to Milsey, hey buddy, going through a bit of a tough time. Me and my Sapphire mate, you know, we ring each other a couple of times in the week when I go home. Then I'll give him a call, say, hey, mate, how are you? Because he's divorced now, he's 65 years old. So if he don't hear from me, he'll ring me up and say, hey, I haven't heard from you. What the hell's going on? What's happening? I say, mate, I'm just pushing through a bit of crap a little bit. He said, yeah, come have a coffee. But that's what I want to, where I'm going to, is to make sure that all of the blokes around here, when they walk, there's a connection, and they can look out for one another, they can refer one another, they know they can speak to old mate, and old mate isn't going to help him for his own benefit, he's going to help him for his benefit.
Thank you for sharing that. Legacy, I see it as a legacy as well, but also thank you for the passion and sharing in that.
Thanks, mate.
Hey, Ossie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, mate. It never ceases to amaze me that there is a lot of really fantastic human beings on this planet,
100%.
and you're 100% right. We can let the arseholes, right? We can let the arseholes dominate or dictate to us as to how we're supposed to be, or we can make conscious choices and we can associate ourselves with good people. Mate, you're one of those. Thanks for coming on and spending some time at Brisbane Property Talk. Everybody, let's just we'll do a little bit of mingling, some more conversation with Ossie.
Thanks, mate.
And thanks for coming.